Diddy is a freak. Diddy be wanting some booty, but you gotta tell him no. Harvey Weinstein wanted to give me sloppy toppy.
Pause.
I almost got a panic attack because I was like, oh shit, did I pick the wrong movie? Because I've never seen these movies before. All I know is Friday is the original one, and he was in a sequel. And I had already sent you a copy of it, and I made you watch it. And then I'm sitting down to watch it. I'm like, wait a minute. This isn't next Friday. This is Friday after next. This is a movie. There's a movie. This is a third movie. I'm like, wait a minute. Is he in this movie? Did I pick the wrong movie? So I almost had a panic attack because I didn't realize. I thought he was in the second movie, but this is the third movie. And thank God he was in the third movie because I just got confused by the titles. So.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because I haven't seen any of them prior to this either. So the third movie is the first movie that I am watching in this series. So I'm not sure what subtleties I might be missing, things that were set up in the first or the second movie. I'm not sure.
This doesn't seem like a movie that's big on subtleties.
Maybe not, but yeah, it'll be interesting to maybe see one day what the first two were like and see how this one fits in. But I guess with no further ado, I will launch into Friday After Next. We start with a Christmas song, and then we see Christmas decor on a house, including a sleigh. A man in a Santa suit appears in front of the house, and instead of a beard, he's wearing a mask. He takes a swig from a bottle in a paper bag. So we kind of know this is no ordinary Santa Claus. And as he staggers toward the Shady Palms Apartments, a title appears that says Friday, 3:37 a.m., Christmas Eve. So right away, we're pretty sure this is a Christmas movie, which is interesting. Santa breaks into a room and he starts stealing gifts from under a tree. And then he steals other things and then food from the refrigerator. Craig wakes up and catches Santa eating a sandwich. There's a big fight, and Santa winds up getting away with a bag of stolen goodies. The narrator basically says something along the lines of, I don't know if I can handle another Friday. So I guess an acknowledgement that this is a sequel. And then he wakes up his cousin, Day Day, and says, we got robbed. I need to call the Popo. And then the credits roll. Any thoughts on this opening sequence?
Yeah, so I thought it was a good way to start off the movie. I thought it was funny. It's ironic. Santa Claus is stealing. And I think they established that he stole the rent money. So it already sets up the premise that they're going to spend this Friday getting the rent money back. And I like the animated credits. Mm-hmm. So I liked it.
Okay, cool. I like the fact that it did establish the whole Christmas atmosphere. And I did wonder how smart they would be to call the police because we'd seen shots that included certain plants in the house that might be illegal. So we find the cops are in the apartment and Craig tells them that Santa stole a bunch of stuff, including the rent money. Which was hidden inside a speaker. I
jumped the gun on the rent money scene.
You did slightly jump the gun there, but that's okay. And the cop winds up finding the plant, which I guess we could call a cannabis plant, perhaps. And they decide to confiscate it. And they give Craig their cards, Officer A. Hole and B. Dix. The landlady shows up and tells them that they better have the rent money or they'll be in trouble. Her son Damon is home, and this seems to panic Craig and Day Day, who have a flashback nightmare about being in prison with him. The landlady tells them that when you spend 14 years in prison, you become fond of little girls like them. Either I get my money or you get your salad tossed, she says. So I guess, we're kind of getting jokes about sexual assault here at this point. They assure her that they are starting their new jobs today and they'll have the money tonight. Next thing we see, they emerge from their place wearing security guard uniforms. On the way out, they run into Damon, who's shirtless and showing his big muscular physique. And since he hasn't seen them in 14 years, he insists on hugging them. But then he puts them both in headlocks and tells them they better pay the rent money tonight or else. They get into their car and leave, passing by the cops who are sitting in their car smoking weed. Any thoughts on this part?
Yeah, so this is where everyone's going to hate me in the comment section because I'm not going to stick to the plot of the movie. So,
Okay.
Officer A-hole and B-Dix. So obviously it's, gag names. So B-Dix, I'm assuming it's Big Dicks, and A-hole is obviously asshole. So one of the people I fired, speaking of ghetto, and a call back to the beginning part, I don't know if I told this story, but when I fired her, it's because she kept sleeping. She slept in a room. I didn't fire her because I didn't have a replacement. But my boss wanted me to fire her because she went in a room. I did the work with her because she was training. After training, I'm like, listen, there's nothing left to do. Instead of me sitting here with you doing nothing for 6 hours, because it's an hour or two of work, and then you just chill out, do what you want. I'm heading home. The minute I left, she went right upstairs and went into a room. I have camera footage on my cell phone. I can look at the cameras, all of the cameras, at any point. I let her know this. I wasn't going to look at the cameras, but someone complained. They came down, no one was there. She was in the room sleeping for basically 6 hours. So I talked to her about this. I'm like, listen, my boss had to fire you, but I'm going to give you another chance because you're good at the actual work. And honestly, I have no one to replace you anyway. I didn't tell her that, but if I fired her, I'd have to be doing the overnight shift. So I spent weeks and weeks trying to find someone. And as I'm doing this, she's still sleeping. But instead of sleeping in the room, she's sleeping in the closets. So I'm like, she's not in the room, but she's not at the desk. I'm looking at the footage. She's not at the desk for hours because she's sleeping in the closet. So when I finally got a replacement, another ghetto person, the person who I said it earlier was going to sue me because she sued her last manager. That's the person I replaced her with. So I finally let her go because I had someone replacement. I got tired of her sleeping everywhere, not doing the work, and guests complaining that they're coming to the front desk and no one's there. So she's like, no, you can't fire me. I set my alarm every hour. I wasn't sleeping. I was just sitting in the closet on my phone. And I had the door cracked so I could see. I'm like, what part of the training did I say it was okay for you to sleep in a closet with the door cracked and set your alarm every hour? And even if that was your claim, you didn't go to the desk every hour. You went to the desk like twice during your shift. Anyway, I let her go, and she starts crank calling the hotel. And she's like, hello, can I get a room at your hotel? Oh, you're booked. Oh, well. And these stupid, goofy voices, and everyone knows it's her. So I tell that entire story because of those fake names. Because she's doing all these crank calls with all these fake names and all this stuff. So that's the whole fake names thing. There was a callback to her with those crank calls that she keeps making with the fake names, with the B-Dicks and the A-holes and all that stuff. So that's why people are going to hate my reviews, because I can't help. That's what I think of when I see that scene. And then the landlord lady is a splitting image of one of my aunts who freaked me out as a kid because she had a mustache, and I'm like, as a kid, it didn't comprehend in my mind. I'm like, why does a woman have a mustache? And every time I see her, like, I only focus on the mustache, and it just freaked me out. I'm like, why does a woman have a mustache? And she wouldn't shave it. She just have it there. It just, and this woman completely reminded me of that. And then my final thoughts in this section of the film, and I'm still haven't talked about the film yet, but is you mentioned the sexual assault stuff. Yes. I was shocked for a comedy how much sexual assault plays into this movie. So, and this was the first but not last mention of or hinting of sexual assault in the movie. So I'm not sure how much any of that had to do with summation you just made, but all of those thoughts came into my head as I'm watching all this.
Well, you're explaining how this movie is personally connecting with you. This is like really, this movie is resonating for you.
Yes.
Okay. So As we go forward, Craig and Day Day stop at Bro's Barbecue, which is owned by their dad and uncle. It was Craig's dad who got them and Day Day the security guard jobs at the same strip mall. And it's Christmas help security. So I guess it's actually not a long-term job. Craig warns Day Day that this is just a job and it's nothing like the cop shows he watches on TV. They should be careful, treat people well, don't cause trouble, just collect their money. But Day Day isn't so sure about that. And when they look in the window, they see a Santa Claus counting money inside the restaurant. So they charge in to get him. They beat him until his beard slips off, and they see that it's Uncle Willie, Craig's dad. Uncle Elroy, Day Day's dad, makes mention of something bad happening to the last two security guards at this mall, but Willie stops him from saying anything more. So Craig is now worried. The owner of the mall, and Craig and Day Day's new boss, Molly, also owns the donut shop where the cops are eating. He tells Craig and Day Day that they are unarmed security guards and that they don't need fancy gadgets like walkie-talkies and flashlights. He gives them a tour of the mall, which includes a new place called Pimps and Hoes. They see a beautiful woman out front and are told her name is Donna. She's the owner's girlfriend. A car pulls up, and a man with a unique fashion sense steps out, and he appears to be Donna's boss. Next, he shows him the liquor store, and he says, "Don't let anybody hang out in front of the liquor store. Nobody." Then he shows them their booth, which is very small, and it's near the entrance to the parking lot. One question: what happened to the last security guards? You ask too many questions. Get to work. Christmas Eve means lots of business. So wait a minute. So it's Christmas Eve, and they've been hired as extra Christmas security. So this job may be even briefer than I realized. Any thoughts on this part?
Yes. So this is going to be the worst review ever. Because Mike Epps, who stars as Day Day, one of the first times I ever saw Mike Epps was in The Sopranos. And it clicked with me because as he's getting out of the car for the Santa Claus, the seatbelt's still on. And it reminded me of The Sopranos because when they were going to kill Chris Moltisanti, one of the guys who was going to kill him he tried to run out with his gun, but his seatbelt was still hooked, and he ended up shooting himself or something. So that immediately reminded me of The Sopranos, and Mike Epps' appearance in there. And we do get our first glance as well of Katt Williams and the pimp. And I did notice his front teeth were out, and he did tell a story on the podcast that he was holding up his baby, and the baby pulled on the chain, and the chain came down and broke his teeth. Yeah. And that's how come he had no front teeth in the movie. And then he was basically homeless because all his money that he was getting for the movie couldn't pay the bills, had to pay for his new teeth. So he's basically sleeping in his trailer, and he had to do this whole movie without his front teeth. So, it at least one of his stories appeared to be 100% true. So yeah, for sure. So they go inside their booth and hang out. Craig just wants to stay safe and do nothing. Day Day thinks it's boring, and he really seems to buy into the fact that they have a job to do, and he's going to do it. So his first attempt is to stop 3 older church women from singing Christmas carols in front of the liquor store. And the situation quickly gets ugly as Day Day seems to imply that they are prostitutes. Does he actually believe that, or is it just something he's saying? I don't know. But Craig tries to rein him in, but he insists that he's going to do this job, and he's going to report Craig for insubordination. The next thing he does is he stops a car full of attractive women and tries to get their numbers. And Craig intervenes again. Why is it every time you get a little bit of power, you abuse it? Next, he chases some kids who are playing in front of the toy store. Craig takes them into the alley and insists that he light up a joint to try to calm himself down. And while they share it, Elroy, Day Day's dad, comes out and catches them, and he insists on sharing the joint. He tells them that the thugs don't generally come out until after 1 p.m.,
But as he speaks, Santa in the mask rises up behind him and points what appears to be a gun in a paper bag at his back. Santa forces all three of them against the wall, and he steals Elroy's Rolex and runs off. They chase him. Day blows his whistle like mad, and he bangs on the window where the cops are eating donuts, but they don't respond. He goes in and tells them what happened, and the cops and their boss just laugh at him. Twice in one day, says Officer B. Cox, or was it Officer A-Hole? Elroy and Craig chase Santa until he crosses a busy street and gets away. Elroy makes disparaging remarks about Craig and Day-Day's attempt at being security guards. You better turn in your whistles, he says. Any thoughts on this?
Yes. Another story. So these old women completely remind me of my grandmother. And
Wow.
she eventually died of COVID a couple of years ago. But she was a Jehovah's Witness. She basically just sat in the house all day and did nothing but complain. She'd always stress my mother out because she had like a million kids, like all these older generation of Caribbean women always do, just popping out like 12 or 13 kids, just based on the Caribbean culture, I guess. And yeah, she was very hard on my mother, and she stayed with us for a while. And eventually she got into Jehovah's Witness thing. It's just basically, it's a cult. Most religions are cults, but that's just a really overt cult where they just get you, the minute they brainwash you, that's it. Your family can't talk to you because they convince you your family is just against you and they're with you, you know? And she would dress
Mm.
just like these old ladies. She'd have her Bible in her hand. They'd come in a van and pick her up, drop her on some corner with some other old ladies, and at the end of the day, pick her back up and drop her home. And she spent all day on a corner just like handing out pamphlets. And my grandmother was not a social person. She was not an outwardly person. My grandmother on my mother's side. She was just this quiet lady who'd mumble to herself. I'm thinking like, how the hell is she converting anybody? Because that's how she talked. She just
Wow.
mumbles, and it's like she always had her head down. She didn't convert anybody. I'm sure it's just a way for her to being accepted, being part of something, feeling wanted. Those type of emotions that they get to you. But seeing these old ladies with the Bibles completely reminded me of that. Um, but as far as like an actual comment on the movie, because at some point I should comment on the movie. This definitely felt like a situation. I don't want to compare it to an actual like really great movie, like Young Frankenstein, but it reminds me of Young Frankenstein in the sense that here's this skeletal plot. Santa Claus is going around stealing presents and money on Christmas instead of giving them away, he's taking it. And here's this Friday thing where it's like, all right, in the framework of Friday, a movie based on one day, Friday is the day that rent is due, and Santa Claus steals your rent money. By the end of the day, you got to get the rent money. So it's a simple setup, a simple premise to get you from A to B. And I think they just got a bunch of funny comedians and they just let them control their own dialogue and do a bunch of skits. And this chunk of the movie felt like a lot of skits. It felt like
Mhm.
Mike Epps just ad-libbing. It's like, okay, now I meet these people, now I meet those people, and here's check cashing, here's old ladies, here's this, here's that. And it just felt very skittish. And it just felt
Mhm.
like maybe they just did a bunch of skits and just trimmed down the best ones and just threw them out there. Because there wasn't really like a lot of connective tissue. It just felt like
Mhm.
random scenes, just boom, 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 boom. Let's just try to get jokes, 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 and introducing a bunch of different comedians in like a short window of time.
Yeah, and basically showing that they're not really doing their job well. You know, they're getting themselves in trouble. Things are not going well for them at this point. Um, Meanwhile, back at Shady Palms, Damon is watching TV while his mother makes her rounds. He seems to be getting turned on watching Tupac. She enters Craig and Day Day's apartment and searches the place. She finds some weed and takes it, and then the dog bites her on the ass. Back at the mall, the cops interview Elroy, and Willie wonders what he was doing back there in the alley. They get into an argument. And although we haven't met him yet, the man with unique fashion sense and an MM hanging around his neck walks and talks with another taller man with a unique fashion sense. And he says, if we build it, the hoes will come. Craig talks to Donna. They seem to like each other, but Day Day jumps in and starts being obnoxious. He tries to get her number. Craig intervenes. And then we see a man and a pregnant woman get off a bus and walk into the Pimps and Hoes while Craig and Day Day are busy arguing. It turns out that the pregnant woman is a shoplifter. She pulls an old basketball out of her belly and starts stuffing clothes into it, while the man distracts Donna and MM by faking a seizure or something like that. Craig and Day Day notice what's going on and successfully stop the two thieves as they try to leave. Finally, they've actually done something right. Any thoughts about this?
Yeah, so I think this is the section where we finally get not Mike Epps, Katt Williams doing dialogue in front of the camera, right? So it's pretty funny. He's an entertaining character. You know, he's the reason why we're watching it. I thought his presence was good. I just wish it would have came sooner or he had a bigger role, because this was, I guess, his coming out party, the movie that made him a star. It's a pretty small role, at least so far in the movie, to be like a huge coming out party. The other thing that was noticeable is this isn't necessarily a great movie, but it's a functional movie, and there are some funny people in it. I haven't really, there was one part that I laughed out loud for, and it was in this section, and it was a dog. It seemed like the whole setup was she doesn't know there's a dog there because the dog kept hiding from her, and then she steals the weed. And I did kind of laugh out loud when the dog bit her, because I didn't think that was going to be the payoff. I thought the payoff was going to be she saw the dog in the house and tried to kick the dog out because the dog kept hiding. So it kind of caught me off guard. So I thought that was pretty funny because it was a little unexpected. But there's a big low in this movie for me. Like, it's a functional movie. It's decent. Everyone's pretty funny in their roles. It's clear it's just a bunch of comedians, not a bunch of actors. That love interest. She is such a she's beautiful, but she is a god-awful actress. And her scenes with Ice Cube were just so awkward. It was just like kind of cringy. I almost wanted to like look away. It felt like a bad line reading or a bad audition, you know? Like I said, she's pretty, but her scenes were just like, they were just like some of the worst acting. It's like porn star acting, you know? It's like, it was bad. It was bad.
Well, I think it was her first movie as well, if I'm not mistaken. I think she was new to this. Maybe she'd appeared in a couple of things, but I think it might have been her first movie, like it was Katt's first movie. It didn't bother me. She didn't bother me. I thought she was very attractive. Maybe I was just distracted by that. I didn't think, wow, she's terrible. That didn't really occur to me. But that's interesting.
No.
So after Craig and Day Day lock the thieves in their booth, the MM comes across the parking lot with a straight razor. They stop him with minimal fuss, and he introduces himself, finally, as Money Mike. So now we finally got his name. So what you're saying is, yeah, I mean, this is really late in the movie to be even finding out what his name is. He gives Donna shit for not noticing the thieves and then dismisses her. He tries to give Craig and Day Day some money to thank them, but Craig says no charge, just doing their job. And then he invites Mike and Donna to come to their Christmas party later tonight. The angry church ladies come back with a group of young men who look like trouble, and they send them after Craig and Day Day, who run like hell. They sprint past what appears to be the Santa thief emerging from a house with a full sack, but they don't really notice. And they wind up going into the Pimp and Hose store. And they ask Money Mike and Donna to hide them, and they do their best. Craig and Day Day get up on the roof and look down at their pursuers below. They see their boss accosted and told, "Remember what we did to the last security guards," and then they punch him. So Craig and Day Day jump off the roof and they remove their uniforms and say, "I'm not going to get my ass kicked over a job." And Molly, their boss, finds them eating lunch in Bro's barbecue, and he fires them. They pretend to be upset, but of course they don't want to do this job anymore. So Elroy then reports Molly to the Board of Health, who chases him out of his donut shop. Craig and Day Day talk about not being in the mood for their Christmas party, but the family kind of gives them a pep talk about not losing their Christmas spirit. Any thoughts on this section?
Yeah, we get a little bit more of Katt Williams, the reason we're watching it. Again, I thought he's good in his role. I thought everyone was pretty much, except for the one actress, pretty decent in their role here. And we get kind of like a Benny Hill chase sequence going on. So one thing at this point in the movie is where I kind of noticed it felt like I was watching a basketball game. Because generally when you watch a basketball game, um, there's no time to breathe. There's just constant music playing nonstop. It's just like, I just watch the game? Like, why? I just want to focus on what's going on in the court, but there's just music blaring, boom, 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 boom. And when it's halftime or when it's a timeout, it's like, hey, we're gonna shoot some like, t-shirts in the audience, and we're gonna do kiss cam, and we're gonna do. It's just like sensory overload, and this movie kind of felt like that. In that, it felt like a 2 hour movie that was just chopped up to just the best parts, and then it was just joke, 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 scene, 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 and there was just like no rest with the music either. If it wasn't the comical music, it was the hip hop music. It was like, all right, this is a funny part. These are the jokes. Here's the comedy music, or here's the hip hop music. It was just like too much. There was no breathing with the movie, and this section is where you really kind of noticed it, at least for me.
Yeah, it is really intense. It's a short movie, and a lot of action goes on in it. A lot of characters. So yeah, it does feel
And
very.
it seemed like maybe I was wrong, but didn't it seem like there was music in every scene? If it wasn't a hip
Yeah,
hop music, it was like comedy music.
yeah, there was a lot of music for sure, and
Mm,
I felt some of it I could kind of recognize. They were maybe invoking some older pieces of music, the way that soundtracks sometimes do, where they're trying to maybe reference something. But there was also just a lot of songs that were included as well, not
yeah.
the score itself, but songs.
I
So yeah,
generally do
it's
that in my movies because, like I mentioned before in the previous section that we talked about, is it's hard to get good audio when you're
yeah,
shooting guerrilla. So I have a lot of music in my movies to cover up the people yelling in the background or the poor audio recordings. But yeah, you figure they wouldn't have this issue, but I guess they wanted. It's just kind of like that hard keep people engaged, keep them
yeah,
engaged, keep them engaged.
yeah.
So.
It's anti-boredom, just keep hammering people.
Well, short
Um,
attention span mainly, I think, more than anti-boredom, but who knows?
yeah, well, could be. So the narrator basically says that Craig and Day Day decide to have a rent party, and the place is packed. We see Craig ask one guy named Pinky for a donation at the door, but he offers three women instead of cash, so it's not clear to me how the fundraiser is going. Damon is there looking uncomfortable, and he actually says, I don't want to dance with none of these hoes, which again, I think they're continuing the jailhouse kind of humor here. Um, Donna and Mike arrive, and Damon thinks that Money Mike looks magically delicious. Craig introduces them, and Magic Mike goes to the bathroom, and Damon follows. Craig says, where are you going? Damon says, fresh fish on the line. There ain't nothing like that. In the bathroom, we see Mike standing over the toilet with no pants on. And Damon comes in and rips his shirt open, and he's got a phone book taped to his belly. I guess it's makeshift armor, I suppose. He takes it off and he moves toward Mike, who screams. So I guess this is where we're kind of getting into the sexual assault that Katt talked about in the podcast, where there was a sexual assault in the movie that he kind of argued against. So I was kind of surprised because it seems to be, really happening here, and there's just a lot of that whole prison sexual assault humor sort of continuing on through this section. Did you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I could see where it's implied that they did have sex because why was his pants down when he was peeing in the first place, you know? And
Yeah.
what they kept emphasizing that they were in there so long, they're in there so long. But then when we finally cut to what's in the bathroom, it's like it kind of implied that nothing was happening. Like
Yes.
when we cut in, it's like that's when things started happening. So the editing of it is kind of weird. So I can see where Katt is coming from, in that I can see if you edit this a certain way, it kind of implies that they did have sex. So I think he
Mhm.
was probably right in this because maybe they just tweaked it a little bit to imply that he didn't. But the way they were so flippant about the sexual humor, I could easily see them saying that they had sex because that's the direction this movie's going. And I don't know why a comedy like this would
Yeah.
lean so heavy into the sexual assault stuff. Um,
Yeah.
and then you also have the scene with him and the girl. Again, I found it cringe because as beautiful as she is, the acting is just fucking awful. But that didn't fit the tone either because, like, usually in a movie like this, the tone you think they're going for is like at most a kiss. But he kind of implied that they were gonna like have sex right away. And
Hmm.
it's like that didn't really fit the tone of the movie. It's like usually the heroic character isn't gonna be like, yeah, I'm gonna slap these skins. That's usually the sidekick. And the hero's like, let me get to know you type of thing, you know?
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
the sexual elements of this movie just felt a little off. Not like I'm offended. I don't
Yeah.
care, but it just didn't suit the
Yeah.
tone of the movie. It just felt weird.
Yeah, I agree. It was weird. It seems like he was trying to seduce her, but then Day Day bursts in and kind of kills the moment, if there really was a moment, because it didn't really strike me that that would happen. Like you're saying, it doesn't seem
But then her
appropriate.
line was like, you know, get a lock on the door next
Yeah,
time. It
I
kind of it
know.
seemed like
I know.
she was down to have sex.
Yeah, maybe. Um, and yeah, you're right. They're in there a long time, and Craig's dad needs the bathroom badly. And so Craig says, "Well, why don't you go down and use the landlady's bathroom?" And and so he does, and she's really excited to let him in. And it's at that point where Money Mike is woken up by water being dumped on his face, and it appears that nothing's really happened, which just doesn't make sense because they've been in there for so long. Like he fainted, and then this guy just stood there for 10 minutes while he's unconscious, and then finally woke him up. It's weird. It's a weird moment. And then, of course, he tries to sort of seal the deal, I guess, actually assault him at this point. But Mike turns the tables by grabbing a vice grip from behind the toilet and using it to crush Damon's balls, I guess, is the impression here. So I guess if maybe the assault didn't quite happen, I guess, is what they're kind of saying. And so meanwhile, Craig's mom finds out that her husband has gone downstairs to the landlady. So she marches down and Craig follows. And downstairs, Willie comes out of the bathroom to find the landlady lounging on the couch in lingerie. And she wants Willie to pay his son's rent by having sex with her. He doesn't agree, but she pulls him on top of her. And that's when his wife and Craig burst in and catch them, and all hell breaks loose. And upstairs, Mike leads Damon outside by the balls, and he asks Craig to hold the vice grip while he gets into his car with Donna. They argue about it, and it's kind of confusing to me, but in the end, Donna takes off in the car, and I guess they let go of the vice grip at the wrong moment or something, and Damon is now free, and he chases Mike down the street. And it's at that point that Craig and Day Day see the Santa thief. Any thoughts on all of this chaos?
Yeah, like I said, I think we're both on the same page where the editing of the whole bathroom scene really implied that it probably was rape in the first, at least the first draft, you know,
Hmm.
because the timing of the scene makes no sense.
Yeah.
Um, again, the sexual assault stuff. It's not just the bathroom scene, but then with the landlady, and then
Hmm.
even when they're dancing on the dance floor with Ice Cube's uncle, Mike Epps,
Yeah.
Day Day's father, the
Yes.
father's girlfriend has her ass grabbed by the pimp. It's like, why are you
Hmm.
grabbing? You came with three women. Why are you sexually assaulting another woman? You had three other women that you came with.
Yeah.
I just don't get like that whole section is like so much of sexual assault going on. Like, it's
It is.
weird.
Yeah.
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 And
Yeah.
this is the other time in the movie that I did laugh out loud, is the timing of letting go of the vice grip, where she just
Uh-huh.
pulled. I didn't, again, just like the dog bite, I didn't expect it.
Yeah.
I thought like he, because she didn't give any indication to her character. Like they could have. I could see why they didn't do anything with her character. She's a terrible actress. But like even in the scene with the bed, instead of implying they were gonna have sex, it could have been him getting to know her and finding out like why is she with a pimp? She's not dressed like a hoe. It could be like,
Hmm.
hey, like, well, I came here and he took care of me. And, even though he acts like this, he's really sweet. He's more like a brother or something to develop her character. And then something to maybe say why she drove off could have been developed instead of like, oh, they almost had sex in the bed. They could have like done a little bit of something to build up to her saying, I've had enough. I'm going to drive off. But it
Yeah.
was funny though, because like the timing, him and Ice Cube were timing this thing out, and she's just like, "I'm out,"
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was pretty funny.
Yeah. So Craig and Day Day chase the Santa thief, who goes into a rundown looking house. And inside, the Santa takes off his mask and he plugs in a Christmas tree and he looks at his pile of treasure. Craig and Day Day go in and attack Santa, and he manages to get away, and they chase him. But I have to ask, why do they chase him? Because they should be looking for their stuff, their rent money. It could be here. All this stuff is in here, but they chase him. Yeah, but I guess the answer is then we wouldn't have this big chase scene. And it is quite an amazing, epic chase through yards and homes. It involves shotgun blasts and beatings with pool cues. Santa is tossed out of a second-story window and then hit by a limousine, which sends him sailing through the air and onto the pavement. It's Pinky's limo, and he's mad at the driver for doing this again and costing him money, so they take off. Craig and Day Day stand over top of this badly injured Santa and say, "You got knocked the fuck out." And then next time we see them, they're wheeling a shopping cart full of stuff down the street and saying, "I'm glad we got our rent back." And we pan up to the roof of the house and we see Santa is tied up and sitting in the Christmas sleigh decoration on the roof. And they say, waiting for the police to find him. And he says, "For all I know, he's still there." Now, this guy's probably dying from his injuries. He just got run over in a serious way. I mean, this seems a little crazy, but oh, whatever. And so, just like in The French Connection, we get snippets of what happened to all the main characters. And the final one is about Craig convincing Donna to come back to the party and into his room. And this time he blocks the door with a dresser, calling back her comment earlier. And, this all just feels a bit like a wishful fantasy to me. Like, I just don't really buy this, but, well, I guess it's a Christmas miracle. So there we are. It's the end of the movie. Any thoughts on this?
We've got like 5 seconds left.
All right.
I'll talk to you on the other side. We'll wrap up in a couple minutes. Sorry about that.
Okay. No problem. No problem. Hello again, Sean.
Angus. So this ending sequence is kind of odd because they really go with the slapstick here. It's just it's turned into a cartoon basically with the violence. But there were a couple of moments that again made me laugh out loud. So when the Santa Claus tried to jump out the window, and typically everything breaks, and he just bumped his head and fell right back in. I thought that was perfect. I thought he should have just got knocked out there, and when he wakes up, the cops there have him, and then you have more like a talky ending rather than the action sequence. Because I thought that was hilarious, but it kind of lost its bite when he just gets right back up like a second later. But I thought that was pretty funny. And I thought with the tone of everything going on with the chase scene, that the first time he crossed the street, I'm like, oh, he's going to get hit by a car. Then he didn't. Yeah. Then he crossed the street again. Then he got hit by the limousine. And then he was rolling on top of the limousine. I thought that was pretty funny, too. Because they could have just did a quick shot of him getting hit. But the fact that he was rolling over it, I thought was a nice shot. It was a little clever. But I wasn't a big fan of the slapstick ending. And especially, I think, from late in the party, where all the sex stuff happened up until this scene, this chase scene. There was a lot of sped up footage that looked really cheap. You know,
Mm,
it's just like it looks like sped up footage. You're not fooling anyone. Like obviously you do that when the action scene doesn't look authentic, so you speed up the footage a little bit. But it just made the movie feel a little cheap. It felt like a something you watch on TV instead of like a motion picture, watching the sped up footage. Um, but you're right. It didn't feel like reality as well. Then he goes back and he bangs the girl. Eh, it's like, is that really the tone you should be? It feels like a family movie to a certain level, you know? It's like,
yeah,
you figure you'd want to get to know the girl. Like,
yeah.
as bad of an actor as she is, if maybe we knew something about her, the only thing she is the object of his desire, and she's pretty. That's it. We know
Hmm.
absolutely nothing about her. Getting to know her as a character at least would have helped, to make the movie a little bit more interesting.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, overall, I mean, it's short, it's fast paced. You can't like doze off for a second because there's constant music and action and jokes. And so, I mean, it's not a bad watch. It's nothing great, which we didn't expect, but it's not the worst movie we've seen on the podcast. That
No.
that's reserved for my brother's wife. Um, and I can see why
Yeah.
people like it because even though I don't relate to this culture, I did grow up black in like a lower class family. So I did see a lot of these things going on. And that's why I was able to tell stories where I related to what was happening. So I can see like a certain culture, loving a movie like this.
Yeah. Well, I think it
Black
is.
comedies, there's so many black comedians in here as well. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, I think it is funny. Like, it did make me laugh out loud several times, and it's entertaining. Like you say, it's short. It's never really boring. Um, I gather that the first two movies are probably better. Like a lot of sequels, I think it's diminishing returns. So this is probably not the best of the three, but it was entertaining enough. I didn't mind at all sitting through it. I actually enjoyed it for the most part. And it's interesting you say the thing about the cartoonish at the end, because that might be the only explanation for why you would tie a guy up to the roof who's just been run over by a car. I mean, this guy's probably lucky to be alive at this point. He could well be dying, and you're going to be, accessories now for tying him up there instead of taking him to the hospital. It just doesn't really make sense to me. But if it's a cartoon, then I guess he's Wile E. Coyote or something, and he's just fine. He's not really seriously injured. But I also agree that it would have been better to just leave the girl and him as, it's a possible romance. It's not really happening in this moment, but it's just like it's like a bit of hope. Like she goes home and it's like, yeah, well, maybe call me sometime or whatever. The idea that he would call her and she would come back to the party just seems kind of absurd to me. I don't really see that happening, but I guess it was meant to be, as I said, some kind
And
of Christmas.
you got to look at in the context of the movie, like of the story. They had like one conversation, you know.
Hmm.
They try to make
Yeah.
her out to be this sweet girl, but if she's gonna bang him off of one conversation, she is a hoe, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that seems to be the implication that, Mike is a pimp and she's a hoe. But is it true or not? They don't really deal with that. They don't really tell us for sure. But yeah, it is weird that we don't find out more. We don't, you expect
More,
to
we don't find
out.
out anything about
Well,
her
true.
character.
Yeah, yeah.
What's one
Because,
thing we really know about her that's.
yeah, nothing really. And they seem to like each other. Like every time they talk or look at each other, there's something there, but it's not enough for me to.
It's like she likes him because he's the lead character. What
Yeah,
does she like about him, you know?
exactly. Yeah, yeah. It's superficial. It's not really a believable moment at the end.
No, no,
Yeah.
no, not at all. And you know what is funny? You may think this is a stretch, but you know what it kind of reminded me of when he got hit by the car and he rolled over the car and all this stuff was happening to him at the end. Deep Red,
Oh
where it's
wow.
like they're chasing the serial killer, and you figure
Yes.
like they're gonna kill the serial killer or catch him, but they have nothing to do with catching the serial killer. The serial killer runs in the streets and gets run over by a truck, and that's how he
Right.
dies.
Yeah.
It's kind of like this. They never catch him. He just ends up
Yeah.
getting run over and, cartoonishly hurt.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah. And like I said, why even bother? Because you've got the stuff. Like that's what you really care about is getting your rent money. So search the room. Don't chase after him. And then if that's where he lives, you can probably call the cops and they'll come and they'll be able to figure out who he is and arrest him. You don't have to chase him down. Like it just doesn't really make sense to me. But I guess they wanted that cartoonish action sequence, which was pretty entertaining. But
yeah.
you
I
know,
don't know. I thought it would have been funny if it ended when he just ran into the window and just got knocked out. And then
yeah,
maybe then the girl could have came back because maybe some of her stuff got stolen too. And then she'd be
yeah,
like, "Oh my God, you're such a hero. How'd you do it?" Well, he could be like, "Well, like I knocked him out and I did this, and we'll know the truth." And maybe something like that. I don't know.
yeah,
But yeah, it's
yeah.
hard to complain because it's not really aiming to be anything major. It's obviously a
Mhm.
low budget film. And like I said, I mean, they gave a bunch of comedians a vehicle to show their comedy. And
Yeah,
clearly it worked for Cat Williams because he went on to do bigger things. And,
yeah,
it gave a lot of comedians opportunities. They had their little own sections, their own monologues, their own opportunity to get a little bit of spotlight. And there were a lot of comedians in there. You could tell based on how the scenes played out, like, yeah, there's a lot of professional comedians in this film.
yeah.
So for what it was aiming to do, I think it achieved that. And I think it was worth a watch. Is it something I'm going to revisit? Probably not. But if I was with someone that really wanted to see it, it wouldn't kill me to watch it because it's
Hmm.
short and it's laugh out loud funny a few times, and it's kind of funny for most of the movie as well.
Yeah. And it is a Christmas movie in its own way. So for people who like to watch Christmas themed movies every year, this isn't a bad one, if you want to just enjoy the Christmas atmosphere. And I think it does do a better job than a lot of films at that
Mhm,
Christmas atmosphere. It's
mhm.
really, Christmas is a part of the story and it's there, it's definitely, it's not just superficial. It is really a Christmas story in a way.